I want to welcome to the show Nick Nilson. Welcome, Nick.
Hey, thanks for having me, Melissa.
I am so excited to talk with you. You just like burst and exude just joy. Like your smile, I feel like you're having a bad day. Just go look at Nick's smile and it's going to make you smile. It's infectious. You
Thank
have
you.
a new book out called You Can Live the Dream. Let's talk about the concept of dreams and why they're so important in our lives. I think for a lot of us, we think, oh, that's just for kids, but you would say otherwise.
I would. I mean, I think each of us have been put on this planet to fulfill a deep purpose, and that deep purpose, given how God's wired us, will give us a deep sense of satisfaction and contentment and joy. And so I think all of us have things in front of us, mile markers, a path, different things that God's, you know, written into our story. But I also think that a part of our journey is not waiting to experience the peace and the joy and contentment until we arrive at those destination marks, and that's really the what I'm passionate about with this message is encouraging people that they don't have to wait to live the dream. They can experience what they hope the dream provides them, the joy and the peace. They can experience those things right now, right where they're at. So that's the overall premise. Yeah.
I love that so much. As a counselor, I am always listening for thinking scripts because our thinking shapes our feelings. And what I'm hearing you say is a lot of us say, if I do this, then I'm going to feel or have this. What would you say to that?
Well, I would say, I think a lot of times, life doesn't work how we hope it works. And
Rarely.
I feel I feel like control is an illusion in the grand scheme of things. We don't really control anything. Our life is about responding, and how do we respond to circumstances and things that come our way. And yes, we don't want bad things to come our way. We don't want detours in the road. We don't want a hiccup in our career and our family, but they come, right? It's life. And I think for me, it's all about how do we perceive these obstacles? What's our perspective of our career, where we're at right now in our relationships? I think that to me is essential. Is I can't control what happens, but I can control how I respond and how I choose to see the events that are taking place in my life. I can choose how I see my finances. How do I see my position at work? How do I see the relationships that I'm surrounded by? And I think that's the biggest key, Melissa, is our perspective on all of these things.
Mm-hmm. So I would love to have like a T chart, if you will. And on the one side is the godly way, and maybe the other way is just like our normal way of how we respond. So when it
Yeah.
comes to living the dream, you're saying that we don't have to have the position or, paycheck, all that right now. We can live that dream right now. So in your own life, what does that look like to do that and not do that?
Yeah. Well, I would think you are for me, let's say I remember I write about it in my book. There were years where I was in a position um, with a specific leader and a manager over me that it wasn't fun to go to work. And it was just one of those situations and seasons that I think everyone reaches in their career where you just go, you know what? Would I be better off somewhere else?
Mm-hmm.
How do I respond to this? Now, there wasn't anything, illegal taking place. There wasn't anything extremely unhealthy, but there was this sense of me just not enjoying going to
Mm-hmm.
work every day.
It was
And
difficult.
it was difficult. Absolutely. And I had to either go, all right, I'm either here for a reason, and God has me here to learn some things about who He is. Maybe there's some things that this situation is building in me to prepare me for the future. So the negative way is I could go home and I could let it steal my joy, and I can let it ruin my relationship with my family, and I could let it sour my attitude all day. Just one person. Or I can say, you know what? If this isn't changing as I'm consistently praying and surrendering it to God, maybe God's wanting to use them to change something in me. maybe
Mm.
maybe there's something in this that's bigger than me that is going to work for my good. And sure enough, about a year of walking through this and battling every day to keep the right perspective and to trust God through it all, things transpired where they were moved on without anything to do with me. And I was actually put in a position of promotion. So, to me though, being in that position of promotion didn't necessarily make me any happier. I fought to maintain a level of joy even when I wasn't in the position I was pursuing or wanting to be in, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that really resonates. And I think for a lot of us, we think if only I could get to that level, then I'm going to be happy. We get to that level, then it's like, okay, if only I could get to that level. And we're constantly chasing that feeling. I know for me, I felt like, okay, if I could get this, then I'm going to be happy. And one day I looked up and I'm like, I have everything I wanted. Why am I still feeling so anxious? Like, what is going on within me that
Yes.
I'm missing it? Because I have everything on paper that I've ever wanted. I mean, I don't have the
Yes.
boat yet or the pool. Those are two things I want. But aside from those like material things, I have like an amazing marriage and kids and
Yeah.
practice
Yeah.
and all the community, all this stuff. Why don't I feel the peace that I want to feel? And
Mm.
so I love what you're saying because it has so much to do with our perspective. And so what do you feel like, Nick, is some ways for us to change our perspective where we are willing to be a bit imaginative and curious about our situation and curious about what God is doing versus being really gloom and doom?
Yeah. Well, again, I think it's number one, I think it's a consistent decision every day to remind yourself of what God's perspective, what he says about you and what he says about your circumstance and situation. I think if you're unaware of what he says about you, if you're unaware of the truths that he says over your life, then it's really hard to adjust your perspective because all you know is what you see in the natural. And I think for me as a believer, I've Jesus has made a whole new perspective available to me through faith. And so I can see the mountain as it is, or I can see beyond it. I can
Mhm.
see the facts. See, that's the thing about faith. Faith doesn't ignore the facts. Faith looks beyond the facts. And I think every day it's whatever comes my way. Yes, I'm not going to ignore reality and the facts. This is, a mountain, a challenge, a bump in the road, something in my career I didn't want, but I have the ability by faith to look beyond them and say, wait a minute, God says that he's guided my steps. My future's in his hands.
Mhm.
He's going to work all things out for good for me. He's going to establish me right where I need to be. So if things aren't changing or moving, again, maybe there's some things in there for me to learn. And I think that's just a daily decision to say, okay, do I know what he says about my situation? Do I know what he says about me? And taking baby steps. I think the other thing I'm really passionate about is, some people feel like, and I've felt this, you got to get it all right
Mhm.
every time, or, you got to, it's a journey. It's a process. It's like, let's just celebrate progress over perfection, take baby steps at a time. And over a course of, you know, over a course of time, you can see yourself mature and grow deeper in those spaces of contentment and peace in your soul.
Mhm. I like what you're saying, and I also really dislike what you're saying because it's like I think there's a part of all of us that just want to be perfect. As we logged on today, I'm like, I don't even know if I sent you the link. What is happening? My calendar is crazy. And I just had to realize like this season is just like insanity. And I cannot be perfect.
Yes.
It cannot be perfect. I cannot be perfect. And I've really just got to like loosen the reins and let it go. That is
Yes.
so against my nature because I want everything to go the way that I want it to go. And so I think it really requires us to loosen our grip. And whenever things aren't going our way, I think we have a tendency to either completely give up in apathy or hold
Mm,
on with like white knuckling at control. What are your
yes.
thoughts about that with what you've seen
No,
in your
that's
life and
great.
just people around you?
Yes, no, it's prevalent. I mean, we all have that tendency to just want to take control and grab the wheel and also, like you said, do everything with perfection. I kind of have two thoughts to it. I think number one, when it comes to our journey and our dream and the purposes that are in front of us that we want to throw our life towards, whether it's in our career or our family, whatever it may be, I'm trying to hold the dream loosely and hold his promise tightly. So to me, that translates to meaning, Nick, God may want to bring in things into your life and fulfill the dreams and the purpose that he has for your life in a unique way. And it may not be your way, the way he wants to change you, the way he wants to grow you, how he wants to get you to that place of destiny. It may not look the way you imagine it and you've calculated it up to be. You know, if you're a big strategist, I love strategy. I love planning. I love getting with our teams and strategize. But we all know things don't always go as planned. And so I would say it's like hold how God is going to do it loosely. You know, we hold on to it, to the dream, but we hold how he's going to get it done loosely. So that's part of it. I think the other challenge, Melissa, for me is comparison. I think it's very easy to become discontent when you're scrolling and you see people your age, you know,
or
maybe
younger.
further or younger.
The older I get, the younger they are.
You know, I remember going on vacation with our kids, and we're in Galveston, right? This is like south of Houston. For us, it's like it's a quick getaway. We enjoyed it. Our kids grew up there, but the water's not great. All right, the beaches are not great. Let's be honest. But when our kids are 5, they don't know any better. They don't care. They're like, give me a hotel. So we spent years growing up, or with them growing up, going to Galveston. And I will never forget being one time there, and we're having such a good time. And we're just in a little beach house, nothing fancy, but it was the best time as a family. And I remember getting on social media and scrolling and seeing a person that I knew, and they're in like Italy on a family vacation. And as soon as I saw them, all my contentment and my joy and peace.
Brown water.
Yeah, it was like he's in Italy and I'm in Galveston. Like this is terrible. And I think it's a simple example, but it happens so often where you can be so content and happy with your world in 1 minute. And as soon as you start scrolling and seeing other people's stories and highlight reels, it's easy to just be like, oh man, I need more. I wish I had more. I wish I was in a better place. And so I think that's part of the challenge as well. And for me, I just encourage myself and others to, put the phone down, stop comparing, run your race at your pace, and don't pretend to be like anyone else, fully enjoy who you are, where you are, and let God take care of the rest.
It sounds so simple, but it's a bit like running. Running is really easy. It's the keeping it going. That's the hard part, especially when it's hot or you're hungry or you don't feel good. That's when it gets really challenging. And I think whenever we're looking on social media, I think it's like a funny story about the Italy and Galveston. But I think for a lot of us, we see people having families or relationships or these really big desires that we have. And we think to ourselves, what's wrong with me? Why can't I have that? God is good for other people, but he's not good for me. And what's wrong with me? That's a lot of the things I process with my clients who are single or going through a divorce or experienced a death, addiction. I mean, there's really hard things out there, and it can feel like God loves other people and has a plan for their life, but somehow I just like slipped through the assembly line and my life's in shambles and there's not much good about me and not much good about what's going on. What would you say to the person who's struggling?
Wow. Well, I would say God broke the mold with you.
Yeah.
I think if you're listening or you're watching this, when God made you and he formed you, he broke the mold. There's only one of you on this planet. There's no one else with your fingerprint. There's no one else that can produce the sound out of their vocal cords like you. You have distinct, unique gifts and talents and a plan and a purpose that God's designed you to fulfill. And again, you have to kind of acknowledge and recognize what lies you've bought into. I think we all buy into lies. People have said things to us over the years. We've heard things, we've bought into something that isn't true about ourselves, a narrative that isn't true. and it can come from anywhere. You're not pretty, or you're stupid, or you're a loser, like that can come from a sports game. It can come from a neighborhood fight. It can come from social media. And I think just assessing and going, where have these labels and lies stuck to me? And how can I just beginning that removal process and going, wait a minute, I'm a child of the Most High God. I'm a masterpiece. He says I'm creative. I'm wonderful. I got a plan in front of me. And I think that for me is just what I would encourage people with, is saying there's no one else on this planet that can bring what you can bring. And God created you for such a time. That's another thing, Melissa, that I'm really passionate about. Is it is a tough, we're in a tough season of life coming out of the pandemic, and a lot of people feel stuck. They feel it's hard for them to hope. It's hard for them to look forward to the future. But I just believe that you may not always feel this way. I don't always feel this way, but there's a unique grace on each of us. God could have had anyone live in 2023, but he chose us. He chose you. And I think there's something powerful about that, as simple as that sounds, that as the Bible says, as sin abounds, grace abounds all the more. And to me, I think that's a powerful promise to lean into in today's society. Is this isn't taking God by surprise, what we're surrounded by. And I think by leaning into his word, surrendering to him, putting our perspective back on his promise and not the problem, we can begin to start experiencing a new wave of his joy and peace and strength.
Yeah, piece by piece and bit by bit. And
yeah.
I always want to add to that, it's not going to change overnight, and our feelings don't always change, but our focus can change. And that's what we do have control over. So much of our life, we don't use the control that we have. We're trying to control all the things that we can't control. Meanwhile, myself is the only thing I have control over, and including our focus. And I think it's so important. And when you think about our dreams, and all of us want purpose, there was a Barna study, and basically every millennial, I can't remember the exact percentage, because let's just face it, there's very little I can remember these days.
A lot of stats out there.
It was a lot of people that don't feel purpose, a lot of us wanting to find purpose. And you're saying that purpose is available to us right here, right now.
Yes. And, John 10:10 says the thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy, but Jesus trumps it. And he says, I've come that you may have life, and life to the fullest. And I've never known a thief to try to steal from vacant places, empty places that have little to no value. And so I think it can actually, depending on our perspective, it can be an encouragement to say, if I'm facing opposition or obstacles or battling against some things, it is an indication that I have something in me that's worth something. And there is something in front of me in my life that I can stay in faith for, that I can hope for, something big that the enemy's opposing. And a lot of times, as you stated, we get in these seasons and ruts. And again, it's all about perspective. That just, to me, I just would like to encourage people, if you're facing tough things, mental tough things, physically tough things, to me, I think there's something great in front of you that you can stay in faith for. Don't allow this thing to cause you to quit, to give up. It's over. No, let it be a reason for you to dig in and go, wait a minute. This is an indicator that there's something in my future that I should stay in faith for, that I should hope for, that the enemy is trying to oppose. So,
yeah, I love the Bible verse. I think it's Ephesians 3:10, that he'll do, that could be wrong, by the way, exceedingly abundantly more than we could ever imagine.
Yeah,
Messages is dream of. And I think for a lot of us, we think that we should have this type of life. And God is saying, like, no, there's so much more for you. And so let's talk about like the practicalities, Nick. Like, what should we expect to sacrifice? Because there's some buy-in here. It doesn't just happen to change our focus, to stand on God's truths, to believe that we're more than our circumstances. So what are the things that we need to be intentional about, and maybe even give up in this quest to pursue our dream and to live our dream?
Well, I think that one of the first key things to give up is carrying around regret and guilt and condemnation from what you did in the past or what didn't work out. I spent a lot of time in the first couple of chapters just talking about letting go of the past, and you just can't carry those things forward. Like God has new things he wants to do in your world. He wants to deposit new things in your life, but he can't if you're still holding on to all the stuff that didn't work out. So I think part of the practical is assessing your life and going, what am I holding on to? What mindset have I bought into? What attitude? What is there a relationship that is toxic or that isn't healthy? They're not speaking life to my situation and to my soul right now. I think there's some inventory we can do relationally. I think there's some inventory we can do with the thoughts that are replaying.
For
And
sure.
so what can I let go of? What kind of thoughts can I let go of? Relational things that I can let go of. And I think a big thing for me, I'm big on consistency. I'm big on faithfulness. Just getting up and doing the right thing the best you can every day, choosing to have the right perspective every day, even when things aren't changing, even when things don't seem like they're turning around or opening up or whatever you're believing for. It's just, I think, staying consistent at this thing. I mean, fulfilling your destiny, fulfilling your dream is not about being perfect. It's about being really good at getting back up.
Yeah.
And going, all right, today's a new day. There's new mercy, new grace for me today. Things within this day that God has packed with purpose. The righteous fall 7 times, but they get back up. It's one of my favorite scriptures. It's so encouraging in some ways. Like the righteous fall 7 times, but they get back up. And so to me, reaching your destiny is not about being perfect. It's about getting really good at getting back up, receiving his grace and moving forward, and not being so tough on yourself. You know, you mentioned it yourself. We're really hard on ourselves, and I'm big on celebrating progress. Celebrate the wins. You know what I mean? So if I love watching the NBA finals this year. They're all shooting free throws, you know, someone gets fouled and they all high five each other after every single free throw. And I'm like, this is game 1. It's not even game 7. No one's winning the game right now because of this free throw, but they're celebrating a made free throw that in my mind, and probably in your mind, you should be making this.
So easy.
Like you're making $100 million. You can make a free throw. This is what you get paid to do. But there's something about celebrating small steps and small wins. I like to just say something like I look at my wife a lot of times when we see our kids progress. Maybe they're not where we want them to be yet, but he took the trash out. That's a free throw. Let's celebrate it. You know what I mean? He didn't yell at his sister. He took the high road. That's the free throw. Let's celebrate it. You know, so I think that's another key practical thing for us to reach the fullness of what God has for us and to become everything he's designed us to become is know that we're a work in progress. We're a work in progress.
I love that.
Celebrate the good on the way to great.
Years ago, I wrote a blog post called Refrigerator Moments. And, you know, when your kids were little, you know, they would get like a spelling test or whatever it was, that little moment, and you hung it up on the fridge. If it was a coloring, you hung it up like it was Picasso and treasured it and made a big deal out of it. But in our own lives, I think we only think that we can celebrate the big. Yes. And so then we don't celebrate anything because the big rarely happens.
Yeah. And when those kids were little, like when our kids were babies, if they made a sound, we had our phones anything out. Yeah, they're crawling like half roll over. We're like, get the phone out, get the phone out. And then as we grow older, like you said, we sort of lose that ability that I think is so critical, that almost builds self-momentum, is just celebration. And it can be in any area of your life. I mean, look at creation. After God made day 1, day 2, day 3, God paused, looked back at what he created and said, this is good. Then we get to the final product and he goes, this is very good. But after each day, he says, this is good. It's still incomplete. It's an unfinished job. But even God shows us this pattern of going, look, your marriage may not be everywhere but there's some good things in it. Celebrate it. Your kids, there's some things there, celebrate it. I think look in your life and go, what can I celebrate? And that's perspective, right? I can look at the 3 or 4 key things that I'm not doing well, or I can look at the 2 or 3 things that I am doing well and celebrate those things as God changes these other 3 things. You know what I mean? So
I love that. So practically speaking, kind of giving up some things. In the book, you talk about giving up the plows.
yeah.
Can you, and I understand that to mean that you give up not necessarily bad things, but just not the best things.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that? How maybe sometimes whenever God is calling us to a new step or a new place,
Yeah.
it
New
may mean
season.
stepping out in faith and
Yeah.
stopping some things that are going all right. That
Yeah.
it's just going okay, but there's something more for us.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that, and again, that comes from Elijah, and this is what he did for a living. He was a farmer, and the prophet comes and says, I'm calling you to something greater. I want you to come follow me. Basically puts his mantle on him and says, I'm inviting you into your destiny. This is a big moment. And he goes back, and it's just so cool how the scripture gets into detail on, he burns his plows. He destroys what was a good thing and what sustained him in that season to prepare him to go into the next. And I think there's many things to that story that speak to me. One being, I would he have been tempted 6 months into, if things weren't maybe how he thought they would be, the grass wasn't greener, would he have looked back and gone, maybe I should go back to plowing? I think he wanted to make a decision. He wanted to draw a line in the sand and saying, I'm stepping forward into a new day, and I'm going to believe this is greater, and I'm not going to go back to the past. And I think there are some things that some of us need to let go of. And again, it could be I've just discovered a lot, Melissa, lately, that a lot of these are relationships. I'm navigating with a lot of people that are recognizing, you know what, that relationship was good, but it's not best for me as I move forward into the things that I think God's put in on my heart to do. All ages, just assessing your environment, assessing the people that you've chosen to surround yourself with. I think that and they could have been good for a season, right? But as well as I do that God puts certain people, certain relationships in your life for a certain season, and then maybe that expires. You have to let that go and expect God to plant the next great relationship, the next healthy relationship in the future.
Well, it is hard to give up what we know for something unknown. But when God is calling us to do that, it's going to bring us peace. And I think that's one of the biggest distinctions of just doing things on a whim, is just like, where is your peace? I love what you're saying, Nick, in terms of celebrating, letting go of expectations. Do you feel like there's anything else that we haven't covered that is going to, what would be the one place for someone to start to begin living their dream today?
That's a great question. That is a good question.
No pressure.
I know, it's like basically pick your favorite chapter, and I just can't. They're all
good.
I will say this. There was one chapter where I talk about our margins in life, and I talk about creating space in your life. We live our lives to the brim, to the max. And I am still every day trying to adjust my margins to make sure that I'm leaving room and space so that my soul stays healthy, so that I'm emotionally in the right place to make great decisions. The enemy would love for us to stay in this state of fatigue mentally and emotionally, because he knows the critical decisions we're making on a consistent basis for our kids, for our careers, for our finances, for our marriages. And I think that chapter is very practical, but it's very powerful, because I think one of the greatest causes of compromise in our day and age is fatigue.
Yeah.
People are tired, emotionally tired. And so we drink a lot of Red Bull, and we drink a lot of coffee, and energy drinks are soaring through the roof because we got to stay going.
Mhm.
And I think that chapter is very liberating and powerful for people, because I essentially say that I mean, like I'm saying now, it's so important for us to recognize that God's given us limits, and we haven't been created to do everything,
Mhm.
and we grew up going, you can do anything you want.
Mhm.
You can't do anything you want. You can do what God's designed you to do. And
Mhm.
he's designed you with limits.
Mhm. The older I
So
get,
that,
the more limited I realize I
yes,
am.
yes. So that when you hit those natural limits, emotional limits, physical limits, we have time limits, we have to sleep. When you hit those limits, it then allows God to do what only he can do. And
Mhm.
that's where faith is exercised. So I actually think it takes more faith to say no than it does to say yes.
Mhm.
Because we're doers and we want to accomplish and we want to get
Mhm.
things done
Mhm.
and work the plan. And
Mhm.
and I just think that that's one significant chapter that I think can really help people experience a new joy and peace, because
Mhm.
their rhythm is a little different. They discover a new pace. They're finding a better emotional place, and in the margin, of course, is an opportunity to spend time with God, reset, find a quiet place, rest, and you become more creative.
Mhm.
God deposits ideas. There's so much that can come out of margin. We just have to create it. So
So good. Well, where can we find you and where can we get the book?
you can get the book anywhere books are sold, Amazon, Barnes and Noble. But the hub for me is my website, nicknilson.com. You can get everything and anything related to the message, the book, myself there.
So good. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Melissa, for having me. I appreciate it.